Hello, everybody. This week's community call is Jay Headley. Hello, Jay. Matt as well. We've got a slideshow for you. Jay, this is the start of a series on leadership. Do you want to set the scene, what we're going to be doing over the next 3 sessions or so, and we'll dive into the content on this one?
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at different aspects of our leadership matrix, and it's what we run in what we call our Unleashing Leaders program. It's a 3-day corporate program, but we're going to be running a 5-day public program in 2018. So we're just talking, and it may be 3 to 6 months, it may be 3 sessions, it may be 6 sessions. We'll see what the feedback's like from each of the sessions that we're running. And so we're going to be delivering snippets of the content that we'll be looking at covering in the 5-day program, probably in the middle of 2018. But really it's for all the leaders out there in our community, first and foremost, to give them really high quality content on leading and facilitating and working with change individually and organizationally.
Okay, great. And in this session in particular, how many slides are we going to go through, Max? Just to let everyone know what we're looking at.
Maybe 4 or 5.
Okay, so let's begin. Unleashing Leaders.
Well, I want to talk today about immunity to change. And so immunity to change is a process that was developed by Robert Keegan and his associates. And really, immunity to change is looking at the function of change. Now we know that change doesn't exist, but we're going to use it in this context to discuss change. Change doesn't exist, by the way, because sameness doesn't exist. So there isn't any change because there isn't any sameness. So things are always changing. So rather than use the word change, we use the word evolution. We're going to use the word change because it's a word that's used in management. When we use the word change, we are talking about evolution, and evolution is each moment transcending and including the previous. And that's what we're referring to in this conversation when we're talking about change. So leaders, individuals, and organizations struggle with change. They struggle with the evolution of the transcendence of transcending and including the previous moment, particularly when they want to shift the paradigm or shift the status quo of a team, of an organization. They want to change a culture. They want to change direction. They've brought in a new vision. Leaders tend to, and this is my experience in coaching, they tend to struggle with how do they engage people in the change they're proposing. So today is all about that, because what arises is what Robert Keegan talks about as immunity to change. That is, the immune system rejects the change out of hand, even if and even though it may contradict what the individual can see that is not working and that also needs changing, they can still resist it. Sharon Drew Morgan calls it homeostasis, where the system seeks to maintain itself. Keegan refers to it as the immunity to change. They're both talking about the same thing. And so this is such a simplistic yet powerful understanding of what actually happens in an individual and in a cultural collective when a vision or something else is brought to the fore, and the individual or the culture of the organization resists that change, even though there's a part of them that knows that they require it, that the organization requires it, the team requires it, that they even as an individual require it, they still resist it. And so today is about why. Why do people resist change?
Okay. Well, we'll also be covering, or when will we be covering, what to do about it.
So it's the final stage of this process in terms of what to do about it is covered here. It's in the not only the conversations individually and collectively, but the type of conversations that are happening. It's in the dialogue, it's in the communicating, it's in the awakening people to, firstly, the possibility of what is called competing commitments, and then bringing, and as you know, the NLP communication model offers, the meta model sword to the framework or the big assumptions that sit behind the competing commitments. And so we'll get into and explain that as we go.
Perfect. Excellent. Max, do you want to move on to the next slide?
So the immunity to change starts with a commitment to a new direction, a new vision, a new outcome, a new objective, a new culture, a new way of doing something, a new way of being as an organization, a new way of thinking, or a new way of framing something. Immunity to change pops up immediately when we make a commitment. And so most change consultants will talk with and this has been my experience again, will talk with leaders about putting a line in the sand and making a commitment to what is new, to what is different, the different way of doing, the different way of being. Once that commitment is made, individually and systemically, an immunity arises to that commitment. And the immunity is counter commitments. Counter commitments are driven by the status quo and are driven by the things that sit outside of awareness for the individual and the collective. And I'll give you, Keegan gives us quite a few really lovely and simple examples. One of them, I'm going to start with a story of something that Keegan did himself. He interviewed over 200 people, and in those interviews, they were people who had life-threatening conditions and had been to doctors to seek medical advice for their life-threatening conditions: heart conditions, liver conditions, lung conditions, basic functioning conditions, and were on a medication that was prescribed by a doctor that had virtually zero side effects, keep them healthy and out of trouble, but the caveat was they needed to take the medication for the rest of their lives in order for them to be high functioning and in order for them to be safe. And yet the own doctors' numbers suggested that 53, and I'm not kidding you, 53% of those people did not continue to take their medication on a regular basis. Looked at this and went, why? Why the fuck would someone not take a medication that will save their life? So he decided to do a survey, and the survey was telephone interview, and we're a big advocate of telephone interviews because they cut through meaning. And Keegan asked, so you've got a medication, you've been prescribed by the doctor, and it's going to save your life, it's going to keep you safe, and there are virtually no side effects. Are you taking the medication? And the people who said no, not regularly, he asked a simple question: why not? What stops you from taking that? Most of them at that point didn't know. They didn't know why they weren't taking the medication. And so Bill asked a different question, and he said, if you were to take the medication, and this is the second component part, if you were to do what to do and you were to take action on that commitment, in your mind, what would that mean? What meaning would it bring to those actions? And immediately the first bloke he spoke to said, for Christ's sake, it would mean I was an old man. I'm only 50, goddammit. I'm not an old man, and I won't take the medication because it means that I'm aged and people will look at me that way. calls this the competing commitment, which is backed by a big assumption. And the big assumption is quite simply that if I do the doing that I've committed to, something, and normally this is also in my experience as a coach, something catastrophic. What does Keegan call it? Keegan calls it the doomsday frame. So a doomsday will occur. That is, I'll be seen as old. It'll mean I'm old, and I'm not old, and I'm not having it. And so the person will put their life at risk because of this framework. Now, most people are unaware of that framework until they're asked those kind of meta questions. What would happen if you were to engage in that behavior? What meaning do you bring to that? What do you believe will happen? What meaning? What value will be violated, etc.? So we get a competing commitment, and it is the competing commitment that gets in the way of the original commitment. But the person's unaware of the competing commitment because they haven't done the work, they haven't either got the action logic processing, because they haven't practiced the action logics that allow them to step back and look at what is the frame governing the game. Joseph and I call this frame intelligence. So this is a way of building frame intelligence. That's why it's a developmental process. So really what this is about internal, and when I talk about internal, I mean the inside of the human being, internal polarity management. There's an internal polarity occurring between me giving commitment to what I think is a good idea and me having a counter commitment to what I have previously framed and created. Yet I might not know what that framing is. Yet that frame runs the game, and it's those competing commitments which equal our self, our social, and our world belief structures, which we are most often unaware. And so immunity to change allows us to get objective to what we're subject to, so that we can view it and bring in some action inquiry into the process.
Okay. I'll let you keep going. This is good. I love Keegan.
What we're doing is we're stepping the person back, and we're asking them to look at their big assumption versus look as it. And that means looking through the big assumption. While we're looking through the big assumption, we're subject to it. When we're subject to it, we have no responsibility for the assumption, because the assumption's taking responsibility for us. That is, the assumption has us, the assumption is driving us, the assumption is filtering in and filtering out what does not fit with it. It's a core belief that sits at the center of us as a human being. Keegan says, and this absolutely fits with developmental psychology and depth psychology, Keegan says these frames, these self-belief structures, we know it in developmental coaching as well, these social belief structures and these world-based belief structures operate and were formed all the way back when we were tiny, when we can't even remember, when we were children without any filtering, when we were sponges to take these things on. And even though physiologically we've matured, we've aged, we've got lines on our face, if you're like me, we've got grey hair, and yet we're still running assumptions that were created when we were kids, if not babies. And so we are so used to looking as them, looking through them, that those assumptions filter out the commitment to the change we've just made. Even though part of us knows that that's exactly what we need to do. It's the resistance arises because of these counter previous, really early stage commitments to ourselves.
Okay.
So Maxi, do you want to step down into the magic 5 boxes? So yeah, so there are 5 core boxes that we use. There are 4 main ones, and then there's an outcomes box. And so the first box is commitment. What are you committing to in terms of change that you want to make? Maybe it's individually, you want to lose weight, you want to become fitter, you want to become stronger, you want to become healthier. Let's just keep it at something simple like that. So there's a current way now that's not that. So we're making a commitment to change the current way. Current way is I'm not the weight I want to be, I'm unhealthy, I'm unfit, I'm overweight, whatever it is. Let's just say I'm unfit. And so I'm going to make a counter. And so the difference between a New Year's resolution is that it's single loop learning. A New Year's resolution is behaviors and feedback. We're jumping into triple loop learning when we look at this, which is developmental, which is looking not only at what I need to do differently. And so firstly, I'm going to look at what I need to start doing and what I need to stop doing. Now, the moment I begin to even think about engaging in those things, excuses arise. Have you noticed that, Martin?
I'm here. I'm with you.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So an excuse may arise. And we don't know why we're excusing ourselves, because we've just committed to something. We've just committed to getting fitter. And so the moment we even think about that, a thought, a counter thought, an excuse arises. But how will I find the time? I've got so much going on right now. It's difficult to find not only the time, but it's difficult to motivate myself. I'd need to say no to things that are really important in my life at the present moment. My partner, my kids, my business, the work I'm doing, what I'm passionate about, taking some time out, all of that stuff. And so immediately what we're doing or not doing. Behind that is a hidden commitment. And the hidden commitment is to the status quo. So what we do as coaches is we ask, what do you think is going to happen if you engage in the behaviors that are going to get you fitter? The person might at first say, I'll get fitter. And we go, yep, that's lovely that you'll get fitter. But what else is going to happen in your mind? What's going to happen in the process that could stop you from getting fitter? What could get in the way here? And so immediately the person might say, well, I've got to find the time. I've got to take, time out of my day. I've got to drive to the gym. I've got to drive from the gym. I've got to change clothes if I'm just going to go out for a run. I get sweaty and hot and smelly, so I'm going to need a shower. There's no shower at work, so that really puts work out, out the picture. I'm going to have to do it afterwards. I've got the wife and kids and all of the responsibilities. So really doing it after work's not a great idea, because it really, I need to help my wife at that kind of time. I could do it early in the morning, but then I've really got to give up sleep. And so that really just leaves the weekends. And so 2 days a week, I'm really not going to get fit. And so we say, what are you assuming is going to happen if you were to give yourself to this commitment and it may come out of this, that well, if I was to do it at lunchtimes, I might smell, and if I smell, people might say, that's disgusting, you need to look after yourself, and that may cost me opportunities. It may cost me my job. And if I go in the evenings, my wife may get upset. She might not understand because she's been working with the children all day, and that's difficult for her, and it may cost me my marriage. And I've had people say, the ultimate outcome of outcomes may be that, if they lost their job, they'd be destitute and on the street, they'd be homeless. And these are rational, logical, professional people saying these things. But there's a big assumption, and the big assumption is I might lose my job, I might lose my marriage, I might lose my house, I might lose my lifestyle, I might be homeless. So it can be as big as that. So what the big assumption is what we call a universal generalization. And a universal generalization is a meta-model term because it is not only global, not only is it a generalization, but it is permanent, it is personal, and it is pervasive. So you can see how this thing has tentacles that go all the way into people's psyche, even though it logically doesn't make sense that that's true. In order for us, and this is where developmental coaching really steps in, developmental leadership coaching really steps into the fourth leaders, because what we bring forth is we bring forth the meta model that we learn in when we're learning the NLP communication NLP, and we learn to bring the meta model sword of specificity. So a specificity question would be, how do you know if you go and work out, you're going to lose your job? How do you know that if you were to go in the evenings before you got home, you would lose your marriage? Tell me about the conversation you've had with your wife about taking time out for yourself, for your fitness. I haven't had one. What stopped you? I don't want to bring it up because I fear that it might make my wife angry, might make my husband angry, but it might not. I haven't had the right time. Excuses come out. We use the meta model to slay through those. And so we get really specific. And so as eventually what is revealed is this is an ungrounded assumption based on a belief structure that I created when I was a child, got nothing to do with me as a mature adult, yet I'm still hanging on to it. I haven't been aware that it's there, but now I am aware that it's there. As I look at it, I see how utterly ridiculous it is, and how that counter commitment, that competing commitment, is holding me back in a ridiculous way from doing what I want to do and achieving what I want to achieve. Now, Martin, expand that out to a whole organization, and you're going to bring in a culture change. That the individual competing commitments are going to arise, and then they're going to be cultural competing commitments. Leaders need to be able to create the polarity of a new vision, of a new culture that stands in the face of the existing culture, in order to draw forward the cultural, the competing cultural and the competing individual commitments, so that they can bring it to the fore, put it on the table, and therefore bring their language skills in terms of drilling into specificity in a really detailed way, and identify what's grounded and what's ungrounded. And so that polarity management, that polarity leadership, and this is a critical component part of our leadership programs, polarity leadership is critical. I need to bring forward your excuses so that we can discuss them, so that we can put them on the table, so that we can get objectivity to them. So your resistance is a critical element of the change process. But here's the rub. Most organizations see that resistance as a failing on their part, as a bad thing, and they try and stop it and cut it off at the pass, and they're missing the point. That resistance is essential for development of the individual and of the collective, and that right there, Martin, is the power of immunity to change.
So the resistance is the energy that's needed in order for the person to then guide them.
Yeah, like negative and positive, two polarities that oppose each other creates energy in a battery.
Yeah. Okay. So what usually happens then if people aren't trained, if people aren't understanding, if people don't have a way of working with it, what happens when somebody brings in a proposed change as a general?
People resist it, and then the organization resists their resistance. And people get shifted, they get moved, restructures occurred, people get fired, they get moved out the organization. And some of that absolutely needs to happen, Martin. If you're going to grow a beautiful rose garden, you've got to weed the weeds, you've got to rip them out. Yeah, and so some of that needs to happen, but you see that resistance is essential energy to the process. That is what is going to bring forth the fierce conversations that are going to lead to new understandings, that are going to lead to new frames being created, that are going to lead to these big assumptions being challenged.
Okay.
And so that conflict is critical to health. If you even look at going to the gym, you're pushing weights. Those weights are resisting you. They are in conflict with what you're trying to do on purpose, because that's what builds muscle. It's the same in an organization. An organization must embrace their resistance, the resistance of their people to the change, in order for the change to be worthy, worthwhile, and sustainable.
And it becomes a healthy frame, doesn't it, for the person who's putting the change in place, that the resistance that comes isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, resistance is
not really defensive.
Not only is it a bad thing, it is essential.
Mm.
Just like going to the gym, those weights are resisting you is absolutely essential to your development. You won't develop by pumping out some air.
Good. Next steps.
So, like in 2018, we're going to run a 5-day leadership workshop. It is based upon our Unleashing Leaders, although it is bringing in so many different aspects. It's bringing in the self aspect, and it's bringing in self-awareness, self-management, self-development, of which immunity to change is a key component of that, as well as action inquiry. We'll be bringing action inquiry into that process as well. We'll be bringing in then self-management. We'll be bringing in emotional intelligence. We'll be bringing in a range of stuff about the self. So day one is about the self. The Enneagram as well. We'll be looking at the self structures. The second part is polarity management, which is what we're talking about here, and polarity leadership. Leading polarities, managing polarities, and about utilizing polarities to create energy in individuals and the collective in leadership. Absolutely essential, and how those polarities can turn into a paradox that will enable you to facilitate with absolute presence. The third component part are the 3 P's of leadership. They are prescribing, parenting, and partnering as aspects of that. So we were spending the time looking at what is parenting in leadership, what is partnering in leadership, what is prescribing in leadership. The fourth day will be on the 4 quadrants as we investigate first, second, third, fourth person perspective and bring in developmental psychology to look at development through individuals and through organizations. Organizations have developmental stages as well as individuals. And on day 5, different aspects of giving and receiving feedback, including fierce conversations and about and bringing more self-management, and bringing the quadrants, and bringing the 3 Ps, and bringing polarity management, and bringing all of the self structures to bear in one go. That's going to be mid-2018. We're still developing that program. We'll have it developed in the next couple of months, and then Maxi will have a web page up with some dates on there, probably mid around sort of June to August time, 2018. A 5 or a 6 day program, probably probably 2.5 days, so half day Friday, Saturday, Sunday, half day Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that kind of thing. And it's going to be a really powerful developmental look at leadership. And so we're going to run a series of these between now and, say, December, where we're talking about different aspects of elements, A, to whet your appetite, but B, to really give away the content that is the difference, that's going to make the difference to our community in the meantime, so that you can, if you like, bring this into your developmental coaching. If you're in developmental coaching with us, look at whether developmental coaching may well be for you, or just take these out and go apply them and see how they go for you as part of your own development.
Great. So the dates we do have, 21st of March 2018, that's already booked for the first dates. Max has those, so get in touch with Max and he will be able to give you more information. The page will be up soon. And Jay, you are available to be doing this within corporates now, aren't you? So
yeah, we run a 3-day version inside of corporates. Yeah, and we also run a 1-day version. We run a 1-day lightning intro to this program called The Matrix, and a 3-day leadership team. It's for CEOs and their executive teams now, and we do that with some of the world's largest organizations right down to small not-for-profits. That's a mainstay. This is the flagship corporate program that we run at the Coaching Room. We've been running it for 6 years. We're expanding it now into not only the program, but then taking it out into the public arena as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Jay. That's great. I think the approach that you're taking in relation to basing it off the models of people like Keegan, a developmental psychologist out of Harvard, we know it's solid, but what you're doing is implementing and dare I say, implementing better than a lot of the academic side of it. It's real practical evidence in what we're doing at the Coaching Room. So it's great. So thanks for that, Jay. And Max, if you've got everybody ready in the link, just so you know, if you're watching this in the future, there will be a link. By the time you've got the landing page ready, you'll be able to check in with that. In the meantime, max.young@thecoachingroom.com.au. If you want more information, either on the open program and give you all the dates, or if you're looking at corporate for leadership, or if you want to look at the developmental leadership programs that we've got one-to-one with the coaching, that we've got available already. So do get in touch. Many thanks, and we shall see you next time.
Bye now.
Bye all.
Cheers.